will we talk about the chaps first, or will we talk about the? So, you're not super comfortable with stuff and doing the Rockers, but then when you went singles and you became the Heartbreak Kid, you seemed to really try stuff like chaps or we can see the jacket there. What was your mindset when you went solo to try and build your character up?
Well, first they had come up with what they thought was their version, and they called it the Idol. And it was sort of this, without the hearts, and he had the biker hat, the Rob Halford sort of motorcycle hat, which again I was big Judas Priest fan, but I didn't want to be sort of pigeonholed as the Idol, so to speak. I wanted to. As I mentioned to them, I was like, I don't know who I am yet. I don't want to come out. I don't want you to call me somebody completely different. I've been Shawn Michaels, one of the Rockers on TV, and it always seemed weird to me when a guy was one thing, and then he walked through the curtain on just any given week, and all of a sudden we were calling him something else, and I just didn't like that. And again, I always tell everybody the story. I can remember Roddy Piper telling me that, don't ever stop calling yourself, Shawn Michaels, because you do that, you lose credibility. Once you start skipping around, becoming different sort of gimmicks or characters. Back then it was gimmicks, now it's characters. But you lose credibility. So I sort of begged them to allow me to sort of find out who I was, who I wanted to be, where I was going to sort of go, and obviously wanted their help. And one of the first things they did was put me with Sherri, and Sherri was a huge asset in helping me do that. Again, it was the boy toy thing, and obviously, this was before cougars were a thing. But again, I could even back then, I could put together like, okay, this is like she's the older woman, I'm the younger guy. We're implying that, okay, I got you, but it gave you something to work with. Now you knew, like, at least you had a direction and a feel for what it was. I mean, now what I was this young guy that clearly was very comfortable making this older woman happy and doing whatever I needed to do. What I mean? And so like I said, like I needed something. I needed some direction. And that helped. And of course, Sherri was absolutely one of the greatest people in the world to work with, because you say something to Sherri, she's like, yeah. I mean, Sherri, there wasn't anything that she wasn't down for. And of course, the greatest thing, and I don't know if I've mentioned, I know I've mentioned this on this tour, but one of the greatest things is when I first turned heel, there were a bunch of people, again, the he's too small thing started right away. And strangely enough, that started with the talent long before it ever started with the company. There were guys that just, he's not big enough for me. And they weren't that much bigger than me, but I don't want to be selling for him. And it didn't take Sherri long to notice that. And and it would get to where it bothered her. And there are times she said, throw him out here. And I'd throw them outside the ring, and she would just, and kick, oh yeah. Because she and I knew each other from AWA, and again, like I said, she was a sweetheart of a woman, but also, she understood the business and could see that we had something special, and what those people were doing wasn't right. And if they weren't going to sell for me, she was darn sure going to make sure they sold for her. And she did, man. And they'd come crawling back in there so fast because they wanted to get away from her, and much safer in there with me.
And so in 1992, you became the Intercontinental Champion. You had it for most of '93, but then you got suspended for a while, but then you came back, and that's what led to the ladder match at WrestleMania 10, which I'm sure everybody here has seen. Talk a little bit about getting suspended, but then that kind of becoming a positive in the end, because it led to the story that became the WrestleMania 10 ladder match.
Yeah, well, so I test positive for an illegal substance, and strangely enough, I was adamant about, like, I'm not doing that one. These over here, yes. This one, no. And strangely enough, that was me at that time. Like, okay, now all these, yes, all right. But you didn't test me for these. You tested me for this one, and that one's a no. And so And of course, any chance back then to really make a mountain out of a molehill. It's like, you're sort of missing the point here, Shawn. So, I'm the Intercontinental Champion, and they say, oh, it doesn't matter, 6 weeks. I said, all right, go home for 6 weeks. Now, back then, you didn't get paid while you were off. But the most important thing in the world was, again, I'd been doing this at least long enough at that point. Things are starting to go better. I'm starting to learn now that, I need to push back a little bit, and up until this point, the times I've pushed back, they've worked and things of that nature. 6 weeks off, fine, I'll go home. I'm going home. I don't care. I go home. And of course, they call me, a day or two later, like, hey, you're the champion. We need to send the belt back because we're going to crown a new champion. We're going to run a tournament and crown a new champion. I said, no, not with my belt. And I said, that isn't your belt, it's our belt. I said, it's in my house. Well, you need to send that back. We're having a tournament. I said, I'm not sending it back. And of course, I don't know what possessed me to think like, oh, I'll show them. No way they've got more of these. Half of you guys got one of them, for heaven's sake. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know. Who knew? Dang, they can just produce them and make them. Son of a. So anyway, they showed me. They go and they have a tournament. They get their other belt made. They crown Razor Scott as the champion. So anyway, now I served my 6 weeks. I come back, but I'm bringing the belt with me, and so I did, and by this time you got 6 weeks, the crown champion. And as you guys now know, in the wrestling business, 6 weeks is even, now it's an eternity. So there's less heat on me now because I've been gone and out of the picture for 6 weeks, and I come back with the belt, and of course that's a natural, storyline. So I pitch them that, like, oh my goodness, I never got beat for the belt. That's something right away I can step right into, and they're like, well, that's actually a pretty good idea. And then, of course, you give Pat Patterson something like that, and then all of a sudden he, like, what? Oh my goodness, let's, have you and Scott work with each other, and then, yeah, you remember that match you had with Brett? We do the same thing. We have a ladder match, and we put the belts up there. So Scott and I started having ladder matches all over the country. We were just doing them in live events for the longest time, honestly, back then, and certainly at that time, we were the, Intercontinental was a somewhat of a focal point, but it wasn't. And, back then they didn't come to you, far in, you didn't know what you were doing, as far in advance, unless you were one of the really important guys back then, and we weren't quite there yet. So honestly, for us, WrestleMania 10 and the ladder match just sort of threw that together. It wasn't anything that had a bunch of build-up or a bunch of talk or anything like that. So presto changeo, there's a ladder match at WrestleMania 10. There's never really been any talk of it because all we really did them was out on the live events, and so it was just sort of thrown out there, not knowing, more as an experiment, so to speak. And even at that WrestleMania was sort of like our first fan fest. So Scott and I didn't really have any time together. So what ended up being that infamous WrestleMania 10 ladder match was really, Scott and I going, okay, well, and we remember what we did in San Diego. We did, let's just sort of take the best of all these different places we had our ladder matches, and let's just go out there and do that. And even one of the things he and I talk about all the time, like now, and of course every ladder match after that, you needed to have a spare ladder. There was always, you always had backups and this and that and the other. I mean, we went out to that thing with the one ladder, and that was that. Not even knowing, not even having the foresight, because the ladder had never broken before. What do you need a spare ladder for? And it wasn't until way down the road somebody said, you know what? What if the ladder broke? Oh my goodness, we better start getting backups out there. We'll have those. It was just one of those things. That's I don't know, and I guess that's the thing of those that are what are now, I guess, infamous matches that at the time we were all just so dumb and it was all so new and you know, I don't know, you didn't think to have backups, you didn't think to have spares, there wasn't that much thought put into it, and heavens to Betsy, it turned out okay.